I know for fact-based Western scholars and analysts, trying to make sense of Chinese politics or the economy right now is basically mission impossible. Beijing keeps tightening the lid on real data, and what little they do release, more fabrication than facts. So we're left piecing things together from indirect clues, convoluted reasoning, long leaps of logic, and yes, sometimes outright rumors. At this point, CCP politics feels more like metaphysics. I know that makes some of you uncomfortable, and you're not wrong to feel that way. But here's the thing, that discomfort means you are actually getting close to the truth. In times of major historical change, like now, truth and rumor are born conjoined. Don't ask which is which, they arrive together. All right, there's a Chinese blogger on social media on X named Zuolai. Mr. Wu is a well respected scholar with a solid academic background. He's written books, published essays, and contributed commentary to major media outlets. Back in the day, he was involved in the 1989 Tiananmen student pro democracy movements. And in 2008, he ran into trouble with the authorities after signing a manifesto called Charter '08. It was a push by over 300 Chinese intellectuals and human rights activists. Eventually, he left China for the US. He's considered one of the most prominent Chinese intellectuals in exile. Every now and then, Mr. Wu posts insights into the CCP's internal politics. His writing style is very interesting. His writing blurs the line between facts and fiction, truth and speculation, a deliberate choice to avoid being accused of leaking state secrets. On May 15th, he dropped a post that caught my attention. In it, Mr. Wu claims that Xi Jinping has lost control of the regime. That part is not surprising because many people are talking about that. But what's interesting is he disclosed that party elders are now actively debating the next direction for China's leadership. And according to him, Wang Huning, the current Politburo Standing Committee member, has been tasked with forming a research group on political reform to explore the new governance model. So now I can verify his claim, but honestly, anyone who's been following China closely can tell the CCP is at a crossroads. The party knows the current model is breaking down, and until they figure out what's next, they'll keep the facade of unity and pretend Xi Jinping is still fully in charge. That's why it's important for serious China observers to understand what models the CCP might be considering, because their next step will shape the country's future. Regardless of Mr. Wu's source, whether it's true or not, the debates are real and ongoing. So before we discuss the models that the regime is considering, let's first understand what China's current model is and why it's failing. So since 1949, China has gone through three governance models. First one is the Mao Zedong model. It was a system of absolute control, a rigid, centrally planned economy, total state ownership, and the government controls every part of people's daily life, from housing and food to ideology and even thoughts. The result? A structure that was hyper-stable but also completely rigid and frozen. Nothing could move. The economy couldn't grow. Even small changes were politically dangerous and ultimately meaningless. It was stability at the cost of suffocation. And then came the Deng Xiaoping model. After Mao died, China was bankrupt and the old model was unsustainable. So in the early 1980s, the CCP leaders debated two paths. One is stick with the Soviet model, rigid but safe for the party's rule. And the other is to adopt a quote-unquote Western model, which grows the economy but is risky to the regime. They wanted the best of both worlds: economic growth, party control, and a decent relationship with the West. They wanted to have it all. That's how we got the Deng Xiaoping model. So on the surface, it loosened control. They gave up rigid price controls, allowed private businesses to grow, and opened the door to capitalism, sort of. But the state still controlled the economic lifeline, and politically, nothing changed. So the economy grew. Chinese people tapped into their creativity and built industries. But there are two massive problems left behind. First is total political control created total corruption. CCP officials at all levels used their power to enrich themselves and their families and their circle of friends. And everyone monetized their little piece of authority, including ordinary people who try to look out for themselves in the system. And the second problem is the ideological sphere stayed locked down. Anything outside CCP doctrine was dangerous. So culture, art, literature, philosophy, even religion all became intellectual wastelands. So what was Deng Xiaoping's model really? It's a mix of state-owned capitalism, mafia-style politics, and what you should call it, elite cronyism. So the biggest difference from Mao's era is that in this model, it let the leash out just a little, but then it had limits. At the 2012 National People's Congress, just before stepping down, Premier Wen Jiabao made this blunt statement. He said, without successful political reform, economic reform cannot be carried through to the end. Translation, the Deng Xiaoping model had reached its limit. If China didn't shift toward a real market-based rule of law system, the whole reform would eventually collapse. Then came Xi Jinping, the third model. When he took office, he actually had a chance to carry out real reform, to take that final step described by Premier Wen Jiabao, break from party dictatorship and guide China into a market-based system. The momentum was there. The world was watching. He could have changed history, but after much hesitation, he made his choice and he turned left. And he doubled down on control and tightened the system even more. So what we got was Xi Jinping's version of super centralization. And now the Deng Xiaoping model has run aground and Xi Jinping's model is crashing into a wall. That's why the CCP top leadership, especially the party elders who are in control now, are scrambling to figure out what now. That's the real political debate happening behind the scenes in Zhongnanhai. So according to Mr. Wu, some party insiders have floated the Singapore model. There are a couple of models that they're debating amongst themselves. First is the Singapore model, which is a blend of Confucian-style authoritarianism and Western capitalism. But Wang Huning, the man who was put in charge of this research, reportedly dismissed it, saying that it only works for small city-states like Singapore and not a vast country like China. We'll take a closer look at the Singapore model in just a little while. Now, the CCP leaders also considered other models. Some brought up the Nordic welfare model, which former CCP leader Hu Jintao once studied, but that's off the table too. They also mentioned the U.S. model, and that's certainly crossed out. Even the United States can't make it work. That's from their perspective. It doesn't quite work in the U.S. Just take a look at the political divide here, right? And what President Trump is facing. So they think if America can pull it off, there's no way China can. I mean, that's their perspective. And then there's also the North Korean model. Kim Jong-un seems to have a very tight grip on the throne. Nobody can challenge him. That, unfortunately, is exactly where Xi Jinping's model is headed, as believed by the CCP party elders. And nobody wants that future. So what's left? The emerging consensus, according to Mr. Wu, among the leaders is this. The Vietnam model might be the most realistic option. Why? Because it's similar enough to the current CCP system to be acceptable, but with some internal checks and balances. It keeps one party rule, but aims to prevent another personal dictatorship. It trims the bloated bureaucracy and keeps ties with the US and the West in a calm and stable manner.